The afternoon it all began was one of those central Texas scorchers that turns the air itself into a heavy blanket. I was 51 years old, Luke Barrett, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army retired, 18 years of deployments from the Hindu Kush to the Sunni Triangle behind me, and I had come home to this quarter section of scrub oak, cedar breaks, and hard caliche in 2019 looking for the kind of quiet that lets a man sleep without waking at every coyote howl. The ranch had given me that peace for 3 solid years. Until Tuesday, May 27, 2025. I had just stepped out of the equipment barn, wiping black hydraulic fluid off my hands with a red rag that had once been my daddy's and had soaked up more blood, sweat, and John Deere oil than most men see in a lifetime, when the first black Suburban turned off County Road 47 and headed straight for my gate like it had a personal grudge. The dust rose in a lazy, tan plume that hung in the still air and coated everything with a fine, gritty film. Behind the lead truck came 3 more identical vehicles, moving with the arrogant certainty of people who believe the world rearranges itself when they show up. I stopped where I stood and waited, thumbs hooked loose in my belt, letting the heat settle on my shoulders like an old friend. The lead Suburban braked hard enough to sling gravel against the heavy pipe gate my grandfather had welded together during the Dust Bowl with nothing but a coal forge, a borrowed arc welder, and pure cussedness. A woman climbed out before the dust even cleared. Mid-50s, expensive blonde highlights already starting to frizz in the humidity, navy suit tailored sharp enough to cut hay, but showing sweat rings under the arms like dark accusations. She carried a manila folder thick enough to stop a .22 and a look that said doors open for her, not the other way around. Open this gate immediately, she barked, pointing one manicured finger at the latch like it had personally insulted her. This is official business of the Oak Haven Estates Homeowners Association. I walked slow to the center of the driveway, letting my boots crunch loud in the caliche so she could hear every deliberate step. I stopped 10 feet from the gate, close enough that she could see the dust on my hat brim and the sun lines around my eyes that the Army calls squint wrinkles, and my mother called worry lines, far enough that she had to raise her voice to be heard over the cicadas in the live oaks. "Ma'am," I said, touching the brim of my old resistal more out of ingrained Southern courtesy than any real respect. "You are on private property. The sign right there says, closed to through traffic. The chain is padlocked with a master lock my daddy bought in 1974 at the feed store in Lampasas. You have exactly 30 seconds to turn those trucks around and head back the way you came." Her name was Margaret and Whitmore, president of the Oak Haven Estates HOA, a sprawling subdivision of $500,000 houses 22 miles southeast, where people paid dues to have their grass cut to exactly 1.5 inches, their mailboxes painted the same shade of beige, and their lives run by a woman who believed rules were weapons and kindness was weakness. She had run 3 different developments like personal kingdoms, enforcing covenants with fines and liens that could break a family faster than a busted transmission or a hospital bill. She did not like being told no, especially by a man in faded Wranglers, scuffed boots, and a hat that had seen too many rains. She snapped her fingers like she was calling a waiter in a restaurant where she never had to look at the prices. 2 men climbed out of the second Suburban. Dark windbreakers zipped to the chin despite the 98-degree heat, gold badges stitched on the chest that read Texas Code Compliance Authority in letters too perfect to be real, mirrored sunglasses hiding their eyes, holsters riding high on their hips like they had learned their stance from watching television instead of the academy. Their shoes were polished black leather, not scuffed boots. Real lawmen carry honest dirt on their soles. Margaret and waved that manila folder like Moses coming down the mountain. "Colonel Barrett," she began, and the fact she already knew my rank told me somebody had been busy digging. Under Texas Local Government Code Section 211.004, all private roads serving 5 or more residences fall under mandatory HOA inspection and maintenance jurisdiction. Your road is in violation of multiple standards. You will open this gate immediately or these officers will cite you, and we will have the gate removed at your expense. The fines start at $500 per day, retroactive to last week. I almost smiled. Section 211.004 had been gutted in the 2017 legislative session after a coalition of ranchers and property rights groups sued the state over it. I knew because I had sat in the gallery in Austin while the testimonies rolled in, stories of families losing land to bureaucratic overreach. But I just looked at her steady, letting the silence build until the cicadas in the live oaks sounded like they were laughing at her. "Margaret and," I said, reading the gold embossed monogram on her folder, "my road serves exactly 1 residence. Mine. And the nearest Oak Haven mailbox is 22 miles that way, past the Johnson place, the old windmill that quit turning in '98, and the creek that floods every time it rains more than an inch." I pointed south with 2 fingers, the way you point out a fence line to a new hand who still thinks fences are just suggestions. "You are trespassing on land my family has held since before the Dust Bowl. You have 20 seconds left." The fake officers shifted their weight from foot to foot. The taller one glanced at the shorter one like a man who suddenly wonders if the paycheck will clear. The shorter one adjusted his sunglasses, but not before I caught a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Margaret Ann's chin came up, her lips thinning into a line I would come to recognize as the prelude to war. "These gentlemen are certified code enforcement officers with full authority under state law," she snapped, her voice climbing half an octave. "You will comply, Colonel, or face immediate fines of $500 per day, plus removal costs. This is not a negotiation." I reached slow into my left shirt pocket, the one I always kept buttoned, and pulled out a single sheet of paper folded military neat. I had carried it in the same pocket for 30 years, ever since the day the federal government deeded this quarter section back to my family after the old Nike Hercules missile site was decommissioned in 1987. The paper was yellowed at the edges, but the type was still sharp, the raised seal from the Department of the Interior catching the light like a promise kept. Federal land patent, I said, holding it up so the sun glinted off the embossed eagle. Recorded March 15, 1987. Transferred from decommissioned Federal Military Reserve to private ownership. No easements, no rights of way, no HOA jurisdiction, ever. You are standing on property that still carries an active federal interest. Which means if you push this any further, the people who show up next will not be wearing badges you bought off the internet or windbreakers that do not fit right. The taller fake officer took one small step back, his hand twitching toward his hip like he was not sure what to do with it. The shorter one looked like he might throw up right there in my driveway. Margaret, and recovered fast. She had done this before. She had bullied elderly widows off their farms with fake liens, harassed young families with manufactured code violations until they sold cheap, and built her little empire one intimidated signature at a time. Federal land patent or not, she snapped. Former military reservations are subject to ongoing environmental oversight, hazardous materials surveys, and federal compliance inspections. I am sure the EPA and the Department of Defense would love to know what you are doing out here with all this heavy equipment and those concrete bunkers I can see from the county road. We have reports of unauthorized structures and potential violations that could trigger a full federal audit. She was fishing blind. She had no idea what was in those bunkers. Neither did most of the county. They were Cold War relics, sealed in 1994, listed on certain classified inventories as emergency fallout shelters and communications relays. My security clearance was still active, renewed every 5 years because some people in Washington like to know there are still a few old soldiers who remember how to keep a secret and run a secure site if things go south. I let the silence stretch again until the wind rustled the live oak leaves and the cicadas sounded like they were mocking her. "Ma'am," I said, voice so quiet she had to lean forward across the gate to hear it properly. "I am going to ask you one more time to remove yourself and your associates from my property. After that, I will make one phone call. And the next vehicles you see will have United States government plates and drivers who do not bluff or back down." The shorter fake officer was already backing toward his truck, muttering something about not what I signed up for. Margaret and saw it and her face went ugly, the kind of ugly that comes when somebody used to winning realizes they might lose. "This is not over, Colonel," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You have no idea who you are dealing with. I have connections that go all the way to the state capitol and beyond." "Funny," I said, folding the patent back into my pocket with deliberate care. "I was about to tell you the same thing." She stormed back to her Suburban, heels punching small, angry holes in the caliche. The fake officers followed like whipped dogs, climbing into their truck with the awkward haste of men who know they have been caught pretending. The convoy turned around in my driveway, tires spinning gravel, and headed back to the county road in a cloud of dust that hung in the still air a long time after they were gone. I stood there until the dust settled and the cicadas took over again. Then I walked back to the barn, finished the hydraulic pump, and made the call I had hoped I would never have to make again. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and belonged to a man who still owed me for pulling his son out of a burning Bradley outside Fallujah in 2004. "Luke," he said, "what can I do for you?" "Some people are trying to take my place," I said. "They are using fake badges, forged documents, and threats of federal audits they have no authority to call. I would consider it a personal favor if certain agencies looked into it." There was a pause long enough for a man to load a magazine and chamber around. "Consider it done," he said. "Stay safe, Colonel." 2 days later, Margaret and called an emergency HOA meeting to rally the neighborhood against federal harassment of community leaders. She stood at the podium in the Oak Haven Community Center, voice trembling with manufactured indignation, claiming she was the victim of a rogue veteran with too much time on his hands and a grudge against progress. She was halfway through her speech when the doors opened and 6 federal agents walked in, moving like men who had done this 1,000 times and never once missed a step. "Margaret and Whitmore," the lead agent said, badge out and warrant in hand. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, racketeering, and 46 counts of conspiracy to violate federal land patent restrictions." The room went dead silent. You could have heard a coupon drop in a grocery store aisle. Margaret and tried to speak. Nothing came out but a squeak, like a mouse caught in a spring trap. They cuffed her right there in front of 300 people who had paid her assessments for years, people who had believed her when she said the fines were for the greater good. 2 board members who had known about the scheme went out in cuffs behind her. The fake code officers were picked up in the parking lot trying to leave in separate cars, engines running and doors half open. Even the deputy who had been taking envelopes from Margaret and every month was suspended before sunrise, his badge turned in and his cruiser impounded. 6 months later, the Oak Haven Estates HOA was dissolved by court order. 46 families got restitution, partial payments that could never make up for lost homes, but at least let them start over. Margaret and Drew 14 years in federal prison at the women's facility in Bryan, Texas, and civil judgments that will follow her to the grave like shadows she can never shake. Karen Delgado, Margaret and's former assistant who had watched the whole thing unfold and finally found her courage, was elected the new community association president on a platform of transparency and zero tolerance for bullying. She still sends me a Christmas card every year, usually with a note about how the neighborhood is quieter now. I kept the gate, painted the pipe fresh white in the spring of 2025, and added a small bronze plaque underneath the Barrett brand, welded on by the same welder who fixed my grandfather's original work. This gate stands on land patented to the Barrett family. March 15, 1987. By the United States of America. Trespassers will be introduced to the full weight of federal law. Some evenings I still sit on the porch with a glass of iced tea, the kind made with well water and lemon slices cut thick, and watch the sun bleed out across the live oaks and mesquite. The fake officers never came back. The developer who bankrolled Margaret and lost everything when the feds seized his shell companies and auctioned them off. The road stays closed to anyone who does not have my permission, and the bunkers stay sealed, their secret safe with the men who built them and the man who guards them now. I never raised my voice. I never fired a shot. I just stood my ground on the same dirt my grandfather broke with mules and a single-bottom plow, the same dirt my father defended with a shotgun during the oil boom. And I let the law remember what it was created to do when somebody finally has the guts to make it work for the little guy instead of the loud one. That is the entire story, from the first dust cloud to the last set of handcuffs, with all the ugly in between. Now I want to hear yours. Have you ever had someone with a clipboard and a fake title try to take what your family bled for? Did you fold under the pressure? Or did you stand tall? Did the system work for you when you needed it most? Or are you still waiting for someone to notice you exist and do right? Tell me in the comments. Tell me where you are watching from, and whether you still believe one quiet man on his own piece of Texas dirt can beat the machine when the machine picks the wrong target, or if those days are gone for good in this country. I read every single one. The porch light is on, the coffee is hot, and the chair beside me is empty. Come sit a spell. Speak plain. The gate is closed, but the conversation is wide open.